Welcome to Rune Soup, a podcast about magic, culture, and the paranormal, coming to you from sunny West London. My name is Gordon, and I shall be your host. Enjoy. Today on Rune Soup, I am very pleased to be joined by the person I most have to thank for the existence of the Chaos Protocols, my own editor and senior acquisitions editor for Llewellyn Worldwide, Elysia Gallo. Elysia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gordon.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And the traditional first question that we ask almost all guests is, Elysia, were you a weird kid?
Absolutely. I mean, is there even any question?
Well, not from me. I mean, we know each other a bit, so I kind of could tell.
Yes, I was a weird kid. I would say that my weirdness manifested mostly in my obsession with cats. I was a cat lady from a very young age. Before I started actually going to school, my mother volunteered at the school library, so she would bring me along with her sometimes. And whenever strangers would attempt to talk to me, "Oh, hi, Elysia, how are you doing?" I would only meow to them. I would only answer meows. So they already knew I was weird even before I started school. And then that just kind of evolved. I had a cat club. I invented a cat language. I always wanted to be a cat. So yeah, I was a weird kid. Yep.
That's pretty weird. I like that. A cat language. And the cat club, was that like primary/elementary school or?
Yes, it was. And it was with the neighbor kids. And all the neighbor kids, I gave them a different cat name. And we had a whole folder full of cat stuff. And I made a flag for our club and everything. Yep. Okay,
that's I like that one. We're going to put that one up on the wall. So you've your career is in publishing. Did the book love come early to you?
Oh yes, I wrote my first book when I was in first grade. We had a really good bookmaking center at school. So basically what that meant is that we could, write a story and the teacher would type it up on separate pieces of paper for us. We would draw the illustrations and then they would bind it for us. And they even entered the good ones into the state fair. And I did win a blue ribbon for my first book, Velma's Curse, which was about a witch. So it's kind of full circle. Yeah,
it is. I presume there were cats in this book.
I bet that there were. Yeah.
So what kind of books, if we sort of move from childhood into sort of high school and getting on for college, typically people who end up in publishing have at least one book that they remember as kind of indelibly impacting their growing mind. Oh, yeah. And what were they for you, do you think?
Well, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, of course. And I've heard a lot of people come back to that one over and over again. That is one that I still continue to reread. The Awakening by Kate Chopin, very early feminist writer and depressing, of course, but lovely. And then in college, just started reading the weird stuff. So a lot of William S. Burroughs. Salvador Dali had a novel that was fascinating. Tim Leary, I read a lot of the kind of psychedelic 60s culture stuff. So, yeah.
Cool. So a combination of counterculture and some sort of early feminist texts and some spiritual books.
Yes.
In there. Interesting. And, I mean, when did you read Siddhartha first? Were you still in high school?
Yes, I was in high school then, but I couldn't tell you what year it was.
Yeah, that's fine. It's not a test. Right, so this is I actually find doing these interviews that there ends up being a kind of pattern for people who end up in this corner of the world. And that certainly seems to be one of them. There's an early book love, and there's a sort of very specific kind of type of book. And people who have that combination, I mean, inevitably end up in some sort of magical pursuit. And I mean, how is that for you? Is that something you grew up around, or is that something you found and when?
Well, that's a good question. I'm trying to think if I read any magical books as a teen or in college. There was a particular magical book that I read as a child, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. I love that book so much. It's about a donkey who gets turned into a rock because he found a magic pebble. So yeah, but I'm trying to think of like a real. When did I first get exposed to that? I don't know. Oh, here we go. Now I've got it. So when I was, I think, a sophomore or a junior in high school, I had a really interesting English teacher who taught all the interesting classes. So he taught mythology and creative writing and Shakespeare and science fiction. And in one of his classes, I don't remember which one it was, but we each had to do a report about something, I guess, mythological or metaphysical. And the one that I chose for my report was crystals. And so I had a book about crystals and all of their metaphysical meanings and how to tell fortunes with them. And I went out to the local metaphysical store and bought just a ton of crystals. And I got so into them and so attached to them. And they meant so much to me. So I think that's really when I kind of started doing the whole burning incense and sitting in my room and playing with crystals phase of my life. I didn't really read any books on witchcraft or magic per se, but it's the kind of thing that you dabble with and it comes naturally, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you have any experiences like that, like before you ever picked up a book where you just kind of knew what to do and did it?
Well, definitely. That tends to be the sort of second run in the or the second half of the autobiographical discussion.
Mm-hmm.
We go through like the literary route, and then yeah, absolutely. Although I'd almost say, especially if you're reading, Hermann Hesse and then getting on to William S. Burroughs, who obviously would do cut-up techniques and that kind of thing, you are reading magical people. You're just not reading this is how you do a certain kind of magic book.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, but yes, there was a dabbling phase. I actually personally ended up reading proper magic books from a fairly young age. So, like, I was about 13, which meant there was some sort of playing with it before that. But I was the kid at the sleepovers who would bring the Ouija board. So I was kind of, that was me. I certainly had incense, but that was sometimes to cover the marijuana smoke. But yeah, no, I was the Ouija board kid rather than the crystal kid. My mother had crystals; she still does. She has an entire wall of them. But
oh, nice.
Yeah, every time I go back, there's more and more. And when I was back at Christmas, there was a full moon, and she's like, "Oh, we need to get the crystals out in front of the full moon." And it was Christmas, and it's such a very odd like Christmas tradition. And they were heavy. That's why she made us do it, because it was sort of carrying these, very like. 30-pound big giant crystals she's got from Brazil. Honestly, they're like platters and sort of.
I like your mom.
Oh yeah, she's she's still a weird kid. Put it that way. So
the other thing that I just thought of actually was in college. I actually took a course on the I Ching. And looking back, I'm like, how cool was that I went to a university where there was a class on the I Ching, taught by a native Chinese man who knew everything about it. So, yeah.
Where did you study that you could take classes like this?
University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Right.
So it's a Big Ten school. It's fairly well respected. I think there's 40,000, 50,000 students who go there. Major university, and you can learn the I Ching there. Yeah.
Were you born and raised Wisconsin?
Nope, in Minnesota.
Okay, so, I mean, has Minnesota always had that kind of weird? I mean, you've got... I was actually going to ask you about how you're at a school with a teacher who gets to teach metaphysics and science fiction and creative writing and gives homework assignments that are about crystals. And then if it's, if it's Minnesota, there's basically a metaphysical bookstore on every corner, is my understanding. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Minnesota is very liberal. I mean, this is the only state that Mondale took in 1984. I mean, it's just really a blue state, which will mean more to your American listeners maybe than the British listeners. But it's traditionally very liberal. Also, I went to an inner city high school that had a really great program called Quest, and it was a program in the humanities where, the teachers were encouraged to interact with the children, not just stand up there and teach and cram information into our young minds, but actually teach us how to think, more of a Socratic dialogue type of teaching methods. So I feel very lucky that I grew up in this hotbed of liberal thinking, but more than that, the Twin Cities here in St. Paul and Minneapolis, they're called Piganistan because apparently some key people came here in the 70s. Of course, Llewellyn Worldwide has been based here since the 60s. And I guess just a lot of people came here to join the Wiccan Church of Minnesota. A lot of people came here for various reasons, and they stayed. So we have a lot of pagans in the Twin Cities.
Nice. So,
and so metaphysical bookstores and
exactly.
All stores. Exactly. Yeah.
Long may it continue. What did you study at college? If you're studying I Ching and that kind of stuff, I presume neuroscience.
Yes, I was actually a psychology major, and with a double major in French.
Really?
So
I'm learning something new. That's very cool.
So on the French side, I read a lot of the surrealist poets and really got into that stuff. On the psychology side, I was really interested in neurochemistry and neurobiology.
Very cool.
So it's all about, trying to find meaning and trying to find the human soul and trying to find out what makes human beings tick and what makes them assholes to each other and what makes them love each other,
Yeah, the big questions.
Yep.
So, studying this, did you think you'd end up with a sort of publishing-based career trajectory, do you think?
No, I absolutely did not think that. But, those are the things I was always interested in. And if you get an astrologer to look at my natal chart, they will tell you very clearly that I have, the publishing house in my chart, and I have the metaphysical and the spirituality thing. And I couldn't tell you what those things are because I can never memorize that stuff. But it's very strong in my chart, but I didn't know that at the time. I just kind of always found it interesting, would always buy the weird books, the encyclopedias of metaphysical stuff. Oh, my mom had this book that I opened over and over again that was every different kind of fortune telling, everything from palmistry and fingerprints to really brief explanations of tarot and things like that. So I was always just fascinated and curious about those kinds of things.
And when did you take it to the next level? We've spoken about books that are technically magical books like Burroughs and Siddhartha. Mm-hmm. But when, tell us how you ended up in the magico-pagan world.
Well, I guess I would have to say the gateway drug for me was Cunningham,
It's a common refrain.
Somewhere along the line, I did find Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs, and I used that to start making the basic, herbal sachets and pouches and things, and using colors, and I started getting the Witch's Date book, which is also very nice because you can use it in a useful way, keeping track of what's going on in your life. But it also makes you start paying attention to the moon phases and, the signs that the moon is going through. And there's a little blurb in each month telling you something about that Sabbath or telling you some recipe or whatever. So I guess that's another gateway drug for me because I went into it not really having read a whole lot of witchcraft books, but just kind of slowly adding these practices into my daily life without any kind of theory behind it. If that makes any sense.
It does. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, like I said, when I started actually doing magical stuff, in high school, before I had ever read a book, it was just very simple instinctual things. For example, I'm going to give the example that everybody loves to tell, the cautionary tale about doing a love spell.
Oh, yeah.
So a friend of mine was at my house after school, and she had this beret, and the boy that she had a crush on had been wearing her beret earlier that day, and he had left one of his hairs in her beret. And she was so excited. Oh, look, it's one of his hairs. And I said, oh, here, give me one of yours. And we put them together, and we burn them in a candle. Voila. Like, that's all that you need to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, right after that, things took off, and they dated, but the guy became obsessed with her, and she had to break it off with him, and she was like, how do I make this stop? You know, which is, of course, why you don't do love spells on specific people.
Very nice.
But, you know, I just feel like you don't have to have ever written or read a book, how to cast a circle, or how to invoke the elements, or how to invoke deity. Like, I don't really think you need any of that to do magic. So yeah, I forgot what the question was, Gordon.
Well, no, that's good, because funnily enough, yours will be out beforehand, but I guess that I recorded a show with yesterday. We were talking about the same thing and kind of sharing war stories of love spells gone wrong in high school, and mine's oddly similar. I had a crush on a girl who had a crush on my best friend. Love triangle, classic high school story. Anyway, he didn't much care for her, and so I sort of made a potion, which I think was based on something I read in, like, Anton LaVey's The Satanic Witch, and we were at a underage drinking party, and I wasn't being dodgy about it. I didn't do anything manipulative with it, but gave her the potion, and basically every boy at the party, except the one that she was interested in her. And I'm like, oh, and I swear that is my first and last love spell, and that's 20 years ago.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, they don't. It's such an unpredictable practice anyway that I think so much of the things that go wrong with love spells is a macro thing that goes wrong with magic in general, which is the results show up in the way you very often you least expect it. And if you're trying to go for one individual outcome, then just craziness ensues. Yeah,
you're just going to be disappointed. That's what I like about your approach to magic. Well, maybe we should talk about that later.
No, we can talk about it now. We can talk. Let's talk the Chaos Protocols.
All right, let's talk about it. Yeah, I just really like that. Like, you talk about probabilistic outcomes. So, you can throw all this magic at something, but if something's very improbable, it's just not going to work out the way that you exactly wanted it to. The more layers that you add, well, this has to happen this way in order for that to happen that way, and it just adds up into this huge thing. That's why I like how you break it down and approach everything separately.
Well, yeah, this has been... That arose from something I'm quite sure Pete Carroll or someone wrote maybe 30 years ago, which is it's almost more interesting why magic doesn't work than why it does. So there needs to be a way... You need to find a way to model that. You need to find a way to sort of account for it, because the consciousness research and the sort of lived personal experience and everything suggests that it does work. So how come sometimes it doesn't? And
right.
And one of the ways of sort of looking at that for me was that, well, perhaps it does always. Perhaps it works every single time. Assuming you haven't, fucked something up. Perhaps it works every single time, and it increases the probability of your outcome. So it goes from 1 in 3 to 1 in 2. Well, that's still 1 in 2. And the obvious example is the lottery magic, where if it's a 1 in 300 million chance and you get it down to a 1 in 50 million chance, congratulations, you're very, very good at magic, but you're not very good at mathematics, and you will not win the lottery.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so that's sort of, I guess, where that emerged from. But going back to your experience,
Yes.
I think I have a personal or aesthetic preference for people who have sort of come to magic from a practitioner or a folk magic route rather than straight in through a particular belief system, because it is sort of interoperable with all of them. And it's kind of interesting, as you say, if your mother had a fortune-telling book you read as a kid and you were sort of spontaneously doing ill-advised love spells for your friends.
Very ill-advised.
Yeah. And then, I mean, once you do find the real thing, and, you know, people can say what they like about Cunningham, if you're actually working with the sort of herb magic and whatever recommendations in it doesn't matter where you heard it from. Like,
right.
It's, I mean, as long as you're doing it and you're yielding results because you appear to have some natural talent for it, then.
Well, you know, and it's interesting that you said that, you know, you prefer that to somebody who comes from it with a belief system. And to this day, I don't have a belief system. To this day, I have not ascribed to any particular path. I mean, God knows I've read books now, and there's certain paths that are really beautiful and that I really love, but none of them are mine. You know, my path is my path. Like, I am my path.
No, that's great.
I sound like a real guru person. I am the path. But I really do believe that every person has their own path inside of them.
Well, this is good for you, because we're gonna you're about to tell us a story about how you've ended up at Llewellyn, but it's helpful for someone whose job it is to read these books all the hours of the day to not get, you know, to not end up going, oh, maybe this is me and maybe this is me, and not playing Are You My Mother with every belief system that crosses your desk, because quite a few of them do. Yeah.
And it's funny because, you know, we just had this conference in Minneapolis last weekend, Paganacon. And I was talking with one of my authors who was there, and I just don't remember who it was, but he or she said to me, it's really nice that you're able to, how did they put it? But just that, like, I'm not devoted to one path, so I'm not biased. I don't have favorites. I don't put one path above another. And like, well, this one is really awesome, but I'll publish some of the other ones too, just to balance it out. No, I'm constantly looking to learn new things. I'm constantly interested in how other people experience this stuff.
Well, that's good. So you're not bringing, you're not bringing an agenda to what you read, which is, you know, probably why you're quite good at it.
Or any baggage, I would add. I don't bring any baggage. I don't even bring Christian baggage. I wasn't really raised Christian, you know, so.
All right. So tell us the story then. Tell us how you joined and how you ended up in the role that you got in that led to us meeting.
This is a good story. Have I told it to you before?
Started off. I mean, you obviously haven't told it to anyone else who's listening, so we'll definitely go through it. But I'm racking my memory. Maybe not. Anyway, let's hear it again.
This is how it goes. I started working in publishing in Budapest, Hungary. I worked for several newspapers, magazines. I was a freelance translator. I was editor-in-chief of a music website. I did a whole lot of things in publishing, and I had never worked in book publishing before. While I was there, I married a Hungarian man. And at one point after we got married, he said, we should move to America. And I was like, oh, hell no, babe. We're not. No. Because I kind of felt like I had found my place on earth, you know? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, you know, you've been living in a foreign country for 8 years. I've never lived outside of Hungary. I'd really like to improve my English. So, you know, it's only fair. So I was like, okay, well, fair is fair. We could go live in America for 8 years. That's fine. So he really wanted to go to Boston. He wanted to go to a very expensive music school there. And I had to cut that off. I was like, no, babe, no. If we're moving to America, we're going to move to Minnesota because that's where my family is. And I need a support system. I don't want to just start over new in another city.
Not in the country you're from. Like, as a foreigner myself, no. Mm-hmm. If you're going to move home for love, they have to meet you some of the way as well, because you made the right call.
Right. And it's like, if we're not going to be with all of our Hungarian relatives, then at least we should be with my American relatives, or at least half of them. So I said, if we're going to go to America, we're going to move to Minnesota. And if we're going to move to Minnesota, I'm going to work for Llewellyn. Like, that was my decision. I just told him that. And so the person I was just telling this to this weekend, oh, and did you just move here and get that job? Well, kind of. What actually happened was we made a deal. I came here exactly 11 years ago for my dad's 60th birthday party. And we made a deal that I would stay until the end of June. If I found a job, we would move. If I didn't find a job, we would stay in Budapest. So, I had my return ticket for the end of June all set up. And I applied for 2 different jobs at Llewellyn. One was a marketing job, and one was an acquisitions editor position in like healing, alternative health, new age, kind of new thought. And I didn't get either of those jobs. I did get hired at the American Academy of Neurology because, as I mentioned, I have this love of neuroscience. So that was going to be, okay, well, awesome. I got the job. I went back to Hungary, packed my stuff. We applied for my husband's residence permit over there at the embassy, and then I moved to America. And I was in my new position for about 4 weeks when Llewellyn called me, and they said, we have your resume on file, and we thought that you would really be a great fit for this job. And we haven't even advertised it yet. It's the acquisitions editor position for witchcraft, paganism, and magic. And, I just about fell over because that was like perfect. The other interesting thing about this is that I was homesick that day. I had horrible food poisoning from Burger King of all things. I'm a vegetarian, so I was stupid. It was like I said, I was at this new job. And the closest lunch place was Burger King, so I went there to get a salad. And I guess I just have to warn all of your listeners never to get a Burger King salad. But I was at home and I was so sick, and that's when they called me.
Yeah, so you could have a good long chat. You're at home. You're not sort of trying to duck behind your desk to take the call.
Well, and I didn't even have a cell phone, so that was my only phone number. I mean, I suppose they could have left a message and I could have called them back the next day, but it just felt kind of right, that I happened to be home and talked to them. And we set up a date for the interview, and I went in and interviewed, got the job. And at that point, I think my parents did think I was crazy because, I took a pay cut. For the place where I had been working was a very respected institution here in the Twin Cities, and Llewellyn is also very well known in the Twin Cities. The first time that I went to my dentist when I got back and I told him I was working for Llewellyn, he was like, "Hey, is that woo woo publisher?" And I was like, "Yes, it's the woo woo publisher." I've heard that same thing for 11 years now. Everybody seems to know who we are. But anyway, so it was my perfect job. And I happened to be here at the right time. And, yep.
I guess
if you set your mind to something. And I was just telling this to T. Thorne Coyle a couple days ago because I was telling her the story. I said, magic, really all it requires is there's a little switch inside your head. And all you have to do is flip the switch. And sometimes that's very easy. Like for me, in the case of saying, if we're moving to Minnesota, I'm going to work for Llewellyn, that was an easy flip to switch, or switch to flip. I just believed in it wholeheartedly, and there was no internal problem with that. Now, for other things, I think that are a little bit harder to flip the switch in your brain on, then maybe that's why people cast circles and use incense and specific herbs and specific colors and really do it up ritually, because it takes a little bit more effort to flip the switch. But I really believe that all change starts from within.
No, absolutely. I forgot you were part of the Hungarian magical mafia. I've had, Utica was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and Theo came over from Budapest for my book launch.
You as well.
Oh, yeah. So you guys are sort of secretly running the show. Hungarian
Yes.
magical mafia. We joke about it, but it's
Absolutely.
real.
And we just met at PantheaCon for the first time in person, me and Yudica. And it was so wonderful. It was so wonderful. I mean, we've talked on the phone and we're Facebook friends, but it was so great being together in person that we hung out as much as we could at PantheaCon. Llewellyn had our hospitality suite and Weiser had their hospitality suite. But so we were always going over to each other's and just having a great time.
And let's wind it back to what prompted the move to Budapest in the first place.
Oh, well, that goes back to, how far back do you want to go? My my grandparents are Hungarian. My father was born in Europe during the war, and they immigrated to the States in 49 or 50. So half of his family is still over there. And when my grandmother died, we took her ashes to Hungary. In 1985, that's the first time that I was in Hungary. And that's, of course, when it was still a communist country. And then the next time that I went, I was in high school. So that was I was on a French trip, because I was a French student. And we did a month in France. And then after that, I took off. It was planned, obviously. It wasn't spur of the moment. But I went to visit a Hungarian cousin in Germany. Then I visited my aunt in Germany. Then I went to visit cousins in Hungary. And basically I spent a month there. And I loved it. I love everything about Hungary. I love my family over there. So when I was in college, and you might remember I was a French major, I really wanted to go to Senegal for my junior year abroad. And my parents were a little bit nervous about Africa just in general. They said, well, it's so far away and you don't know anybody. And if anything happened to you, we don't know anybody over there. And they said, you always wanted to learn Hungarian. Why don't you go to Hungary? You could learn another language. And, me being the language nerd that I am, I was like, ooh, yeah, good point. So I did my junior year abroad in Budapest and lived with some Hungarian relatives. And then I had to come back here to finish college. And when I did, that was the first thing I wanted to do was, move back and start my life there. So that's what I did.
Well, I understand completely.
Yeah, you're a world traveler as well. You've lived around.
And also, my reasons are vaguely similar for the UK because it's on mother's side rather than my father's side. But it was there's like an ancestor identity journey component to it,
Yes.
which I didn't get growing up, and I'm at the 8-year mark myself. So it obviously took. You obviously thought, yeah, I can live here. I feel like me when I'm here. It's an amazing place, but that for me was part of the pull. Was the kind of going through that identity exploration stuff.
Absolutely, and I don't know if a lot of Europeans have that in the way that we, I guess, immigrant cultures, the US, have that.
Dirty colonials, New Worlders, whatever you want to call us. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of is part of magic as well. The magic of the land. It's like I am of this land, but I'm also not of this land. So, it's a lot of interesting perspectives.
I completely understand that. I am born and raised Australian, and so it's dirt is in my bones, but I actually feel quite fortunate to have two, like I'm cheating.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, so what was... Let's wind it back. I just thought when you mentioned the Hungarian thing, I'm like, oh yes, Hungarian mafia. I must bring that up and find out what that journey was. Yeah. But going back to magical publishing in general, what was day one like?
I don't remember. That was 11 years ago. There was like
That's not a good story.
It was a completely empty cube. There was this nice girl named Natalie who trained me in on everything and left me her scissors. Yeah, it was a long time ago. It was a long
That's not the
time
story
ago.
I was hoping for. I was hoping for
Okay,
yeah.
what do you want to
Because,
hear? I'll try to.
Yeah. Well, you kind of either you caused it with magic, or your intuitive faculty made you aware that this was a thing that was going to happen. You crossed an ocean for it. You were home the day you got the call,
Right.
and you're telling me Natalie left some scissors. Is what happened on day one?
Well, you asked me the first day.
Yeah.
You didn't say like the first year.
No,
I mean,
no.
it's
Yeah, first
really,
day. You can make it up and be like, "Oh, it was amazing," and yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you what I remember about my interview. Llewellyn was based in St. Paul, which is where I live and where I was conceived and all of that stuff, right? I've lived almost my entire life, I mean, outside of the Wisconsin part and the Budapest part, in St. Paul. And of course, the week that I interviewed with them was the week that they moved their offices to Woodbury, which is a dead, soulless suburb. And it was a brand new building that the Weschkes had built. And I guess when they had made the diagrams, they said, oh, this side of the building is sales and marketing and publicity. This side of the building is production, which for us means book production, like sitting around editing and things. Well, I guess the people thought that production meant that we were putting in some kind of machines. And so they made that side of the building much colder than the other side of the building. If you can follow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I'm just trying to work out, because like you came home to do this call and it was snowing and it's the end of March. So if you're put in like a cold building, as an Australian, this sounds like hell.
So it was like August. It was a jillion degrees outside, and I go in, and we had the interview in a little conference room, and there was like 5 people interviewing me at once. And everybody's wearing a blanket or a shawl or gloves in the middle of August. And I was wearing linen pants and a linen shirt, and I was freezing. And everybody apologized so much. They were like, we're so sorry that we haven't figured out how to make this building not so cold. So yeah, that was my first impression. But anyway, I was just like, I was so enthusiastic to be there. For the first several years, my coworker Barbara continually, whenever I had a bad meeting or anything, she would say, so is this still your dream job? And I would say, yes, it's still my dream job. So, but yeah, I mean, how can I even put it? It's been a great place to work. My boss is very supportive of me. The owners have been very supportive of me. Carl was, a personal connection to me, like a mentor, really. He was a great guy. And it's also a really good job, just, again, getting on with the psychology bit. I'm like this really good mix of introvert and extrovert. So both parts of me are happy in this job, because sometimes I'm an introvert and I just get to sit there buried in a book, making notes, fact-checking, being a grammar nerd and an etymology nerd and all of that kind of thing. And then half the time I get to be an extrovert. I get to put on my pointy hat, go out to conferences, meet new people, schmooze, do exciting and fabulous podcast interviews.
Obviously.
So, yeah, I think it's a really good match for me personally.
Well, I can attest to your nerd powers. For me, I mean, this is obviously it's the first book I wrote, and yeah, having written writing for since I was a kid, and I actually think I won my primary school creative writing award for a sequel to Jurassic Park I wrote that. Probably some copyright issues with that as I think back on it.
And it's called fan fiction. That's fine.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it was amazing to get to go through the process, and because we'd been chatting beforehand about what we could write and maybe the shape of the book and how you saw it and sort of bouncing ideas backwards and forwards. And so I was used to that, Elysia. I was used to the kind of sort of freewheeling Elysia, and then I get these books back or these notes back, and it was the first time through, I'm like, I've never experienced someone actually come to me and go, no, what's this? And it was just relentless. It was relentless. Like, what's this? They won't get that. No, it was amazing. I mean, I emailed you from JFK Airport when we finished up just to say a big thank you. It's like a much better book because of that process, because of that input. But I'd never, I mean, obviously it was the first time it had happened to me, so I don't know if that's what everyone experiences with an editor, but it was just this laser focus, and it's a really good book because of your massive nerd skills.
Thank you. Yeah, so what I'm hearing is I'm kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah. Aren't we
and
all?
Maybe that's how I snag them in. Like I go to conferences, I'm all charming, I'm very nice to people. And honestly, I love that part of my job and I love being nice to people. But then it's a book, so I don't mess around, because what I like to tell people is like words have meaning. They do. You can't just write anything. You can't be too vague. You can't be too general. You can't bullshit your way out of things, you know? You want it to be something beautiful and that you're going to be proud of, and also that people are going to understand and be able to put their own spin on, be able to apply practically in their lives. So yeah, nerd superpowers, but also it's just kind of like that thing that people say about 10,000 hours. If you do something for 10,000 hours, you're going to be a master at it.
Well, you definitely are. So, and you work very hard, so I'm sure you're pretty close to it.
It's been a long time. So I really feel like I'm really good at what I do. Like I'm good at reading manuscripts and offering feedback. That's my superpower.
And just sort of relying on your superpower a bit more there, what are your impressions of how, if not magical publishing, magical writing has changed in the sort of 11 years you've been doing this?
Oh my. I don't even know how to answer that, Gordon.
All right.
I'm racking my brain. I mean, in the 10 years or whatever that I have been doing it, I don't know. I mean, go back a little bit farther. Go back to like the 90s and the Celestine Prophecy. Now there's a big shift, you know?
Well, I was, just wondering, because you read lots of stuff, much of which doesn't become a book. And so I'm just wondering if you have an opinion on, or an observation on, the kind of macro changes in the things people are focusing on. So 10 years ago, every second book was about hoodoo or what have you, and looking at where things are going today. Because it seems like of all the places, I mean, we are talking about a comparatively small industry in terms of publishing in general, but it's still, you're at the coalface of one of the larger components of it. So if anyone could if anyone is well positioned to have kind of a view on the changes in the sort of, the headspace of magical writing over the last decade, it would be you.
Right.
No pressure.
Let's just put it this way. I do like analyzing things quite a bit, but I also want to see something in front of me when I'm doing it. So it's hard for me to just kind of off the cuff say, well, these are the trends. I've never been a real buyer inner of trends, like, oh, well, now everybody's doing witchcraft and now everybody's doing chaos magic. So I wouldn't look at it in terms of we used to have a lot of this and now we have a lot of that. I would look at it more in terms of people are becoming a lot more aware of how their words are affecting other people. And I think that there's a social justice component that people are becoming more aware of. They're becoming more aware of anti-racism and anti-transphobia. It's not enough just to say, well, I'm not a racist, but you have to actually be against the people who are trying to hold down other people. So I think maybe that manifested in the pagan community earlier as a big wave of sex positivity. And now it's not about that. It's about people. It's more about people positivity. It's about standing up for other people, It's about being an ally and giving a voice to other people. I don't know. I'm really feeling strongly about this right now because it's been a big theme at conferences that I attend for the past, 2 or 3 years. And everything that happens in these spaces, in these magical charged spaces where there's just hundreds, if not thousands of attendees, and people are really talking about this stuff and grappling with it, that always comes through sooner or later in the writing and the kinds of projects that come across my desk. So definitely seeing more steps towards social inclusivity, and something that I've been on about ever since I started at Llewellyn is, I don't want as many practical how-to books, the 101 kind of stuff. I'm looking for more, how does this apply to our life, our lifestyles, our values? How does it apply to music, to literature, to art, that's why I love, again, getting back to the Chaos Protocols. It's a magic book, but it has such a bigger message. It's about a moment in time. It's about economics. It's about globalism. It's reaching its tentacles far beyond, just, here's some spells you can do for prosperity or whatever. And that's what really makes me excited about, the books that I've been doing lately, just taking it to the next level.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the discussions we were having as we were going backwards and forwards. Inevitably, I mean, it's an independent business that's been around for decades. So inevitably, Llewellyn's published a load of stuff, and there will always be a market for instructional books.
Yep.
And that's completely fine. But we were going backwards and forwards on that because I said I don't have like a how-to chaos magic book in me, largely because they're out there. Like, how many more of them do we need?
Right.
And when we were when it became apparent that we were sort of eye to eye on that stuff, that's where it came from. And I mean, I agree completely. The project, whilst it has a lot of practical components and actual magic in it, the book is about, as you say, it's a moment in time. It's about extracting meaning from this kind of late capitalist moment. But I can see that. I can see your fingers or your fingerprints on some of the other positive changes in that publishing process. Because I remember one of the books you used as an example, because you're obviously working on it when we were chatting, was the Book of Oberon. And I'm like, what the hell is it? Like, what is this, a Shakespeare grimoire? That sounds like crap. And obviously, I pre-ordered it and got it, and it showed up the day. The fastest day possible, at least in London. And I'm like, this is not what I was expecting. And that was a very confident, and I think for you, for an editor, that would have tapped your nerd skills to the max, because you're.
Oh my God, you don't even know.
Well, I just went through it with my little book, and then I see this, and I'm like, so it's several languages, and it's in different colors, and there's pictures. Goodness.
Yeah, and the best part about the Book of Oberon is you can look at the entire manuscript online on the Folgers website, the Folgers Shakespearean Library. They have the entire thing online, so you can imagine how much I nerded out when I would need to see, well, what are these guys talking about? And I could just look it up on the original thing and see it written in that old, 16th century hand. It was just really fabulous. That was a fun book to work on. And it took forever, but all good things that are worth doing, take forever.
Well, yeah, that one definitely was. I mean, I read a lot of actual grimoires. And for me, that was, and this is, I mean, Dan Harms and everything, congratulations on writing a very compelling and useful book. In terms of, that's the best laid out grimoire I've read, because usually they're not very well laid out. And it was the different colors in the font. And that was having sort of, because we'd finished up on Chaos Protocols before I got Oberon last year. We'd more or less finished up.
Right.
And so I could see your fingerprints all over it, because I'd just gone through that process of like, what does this mean? You said that already. This is it. And I just looked at this this enormous doorstop of very well laid out stuff, and I'm like, wow, that's Elysia at 11 out of 10. Yeah.
Well, and I really have to say that book was thanks to Donna Birch Brown, who was the layout designer.
Oh, really?
Because you can't imagine how hard it was to have the two separate tables, like, where you've got the two columns where you have the Latin and the English next to each other. But then there's also footnotes in there. And footnotes don't work suddenly if you're in a table. So she had to do, like, 3/4 of that book manually. It's insane. Like, it's insane the amount of effort that went into that. And also all of the red parts, like you said, that is also the production editor, which was Stephanie Finney. And she was pregnant while she worked on the Book of Oberon. And we would joke that her baby was just going to be some kind of crazy wizard for gestating with that book. Because also, she had been working on the Golden Dawn, the new edition of the Golden Dawn, and she thought that would be done by the time she went on maternity leave, but it wasn't. So even when she came back from maternity leave, she still had to work on the Golden Dawn. So I feel like whatever is in that baby's body...
Yeah.
Yeah, that baby's going to be...
That kid's going to come out speaking either a Victorian accent or writing Shakespeare or something.
Or something. Yeah, maybe they will just have, like, really clear visions of speaking Latin and, I don't know. It's just fascinating. But, yeah, I'm really proud of those books. I really feel like, like what we were talking about, not every book's going to be a 101 book. We got to do the 101 books, but also we have to challenge ourselves, and we have to do some things that are serious. And I love working on those. So, because that's what makes little nerd heart happy over here.
But I also think there's an opportunity and a almost responsibility for a publisher. Again, we're talking about such a small industry, but for a publisher with Llewellyn's remit or footprint, the opportunity to be part of culture change there for magic is something. And I mean, we resonated. You definitely got that. Your dedication to that idea that this wasn't just a job, however good you are at it, came through quite clearly. And Oberon, I think, is one of the sort of examples of that. We can kind of push that culture. And again, I mean, goodness, we all read, there's nothing wrong with being new. We all read the how-to books. That's right, there's a market for them. And all I said was I definitely don't have one in me. Right. But they still need to be out there. Let's not all, not all get super academic about it.
And one of my favorite parts about the Chaos Protocols is just that nice little appendix we slipped in. Let's see, what is it called here?
The Grimoire That Wasn't.
The Grimoire That Wasn't. I love it because it's just tucked in there, but it's right there if you ever need it. Kitty, don't get on my computer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. What's the
there was a
fun?
Computer. Yeah. I just didn't want her to touch any buttons. Yeah, so I love the Grimoire That Wasn't because it's just this nice collection of very simple, to the point stuff, just powerful. It's not written around. It's not frilly or like really overly basic.
Yeah,
it's just what it is. It's just boom, here. These are other things that I do. Try them out.
Well, we kind of did a molecular gastronomy deconstructed Llewellyn book.
Yeah.
Because you and I were talking about, I'm like, I don't know where, this can't be the first magical book someone's ever read. And you're like, well, as a thought experiment, see what you can do, like, as if it were. And so we've kind of come up with this very deconstructed Llewellyn thing, which is the entire book is not... It can be your second book on magic, but it probably shouldn't be your first.
It probably wouldn't be the first.
No. But it's interesting that it technically could be, because this is where we got there at the end, because in the appendix, there is a bit that's like, okay, I mean, it's absurd to give someone a description of how you meditate, but it is in there. So it's technically...
It's because you... And that's the whole thing, Gordon, is like anything can happen in this world. Somebody could just happen to be walking past and see this beautiful cover and just really need to read that book, and maybe they never have heard of you. Maybe they don't know anything, but that is what they need in that particular moment in time.
See, this was the stuff that I would have gone, nope, don't need any of that. And it's fascinating how it's landed, because you were right and I was wrong.
Well, and it is molecular gastronomy, and that appendix is like the Parmesan foam reduction on top.
Yeah, optional.
It's just... I like it. I like the way that it makes it taste.
No, absolutely. I mean, I love it. I think it's great that it's in there, and it has a sense of humor, but yes. It's not a...
You are a really funny writer. I mean, this was one of the books that I probably laughed the most at, in a good way.
In a good way. Because you read like a lot of manuscripts. I could have taken that either way. It's like...
I do. I really do. But no, I love it. It's just, it's very lively. It'll definitely keep people reading.
Well, good. And, I mean, we were just sort of talking about books that are either coming out or the opportunity to have books out there that can provide a culture change within magic. So let's close out with a final question, Elysia. What are you optimistic about in the field?
Jailbreaking the Goddess. Oh my God, you all have to read it. Jailbreaking the Goddess. It's Lasara Firefox Allen. It will be out this summer. And she's radically revisioning feminist spirituality. And what that means is you've probably heard of the maiden, mother, and crone archetypes.
Sure.
And she says, well, that just reduces women to their biology. It makes our value tied to our uterus and whether we are bearing children or not. And that's so wrong in so many ways. Not just for women like me who choose to remain childless, but for women who were born without a uterus, for women who were born, just intersex, for transgender women, and even for men. I mean, hello, feminism is just as much for men as it is for women. So it's kind of releasing that from the bonds of you're either a maiden, you're a mother, or you're a crone. And she talks about decolonizing our magic and getting away from the hierarchies and the hierarchy of, how everybody wants to be one up on somebody else. How, of course, men, they have, they're one up level from women, and therefore women are up one level from black women or from transgender women, and then those women in turn are one step up from somebody else, and so on and so forth. And so she really wants us to come from a place of equality where, and I believe there's a really good part in the book that I just really resonated with, where she says, it's not inviting people to the table. Because if I invite somebody to the table, it still is my house. It still is my cooking. I'm still the one who's deciding what we're going to eat. So it's not inviting people to the table. It's gathering people together and saying, hey, what should we make for dinner? Right? So it's this whole thought process, getting away from these assumptions that we carry with us, regarding gender roles, but also just regarding the cycles of a woman's life. So she instead of maiden, mother, crone, she introduces 5 different archetypes to work with that women cycle in and out of throughout their entire lives. So you might be really new in one phase of your life, a new relationship, a new job, but you might be a master in another part of your life, or you might be a scientist in another part of your life. So it's called Jailbreaking the Goddess, and I love it like 100%. And I do think that this is going to be a very talked about book in the witchcraft community, because it is very radical and it's very inclusive. And she had so many people read it, women of color, transgender women, and men as well, just to make sure that she really said everything that she wanted to say about this topic. So I do think that it has the potential to be a game changer and to get people to really start inspecting their assumptions around gender.
Well, yeah, I'm floored. That sounds like That's a great. So, okay, let's widen it out from what sounds like an amazing book that's coming up. You are optimistic culturally about the opportunity for radical inclusiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That book sounds phenomenal. We'll definitely pick it up. Well, Elysia, this has been an absolute blast. We've had a few Skype chats over the course of the book and so on, and now I have a bit more of your backstory, and suddenly pieces of the journey make a bit more sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very much thank you for your time.
Thank you. I just love talking with you, and I hope that everybody out there reads your book and they love it as much as I did, because it's awesome.
There you have it, a completely impartial, unbiased opinion of the Chaos Protocols. Alongside that, we had love spells, magical writing, magical reading, cats, including the appearance of an actual cat, and the role of magic and synchronicity in one's career. If you liked what you heard, feel free to subscribe in iTunes, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, or on YouTube. Or join in at runesoup.com, the RuneSoup Facebook page, or find me on Twitter where I am Gordon, Gordon_White, WHITE. Until next time.